Hey, welcome everyone to Trend Talks BizSec, episode 43. I'm your host, Jon Clay, VP of Threat Intelligence. Joining me again is Greg Young, VP of Cybersecurity at Trend. Greg, today we're going to talk a little bit about vulnerabilities and vulnerability management and all that good stuff because we had our zero-day initiative, which if you don't know about this organization, it's part of Trend Micro. They do a agnostic bug bounty program. So they buy bugs from researchers all over the world. We got about 18,000 plus researchers that are tied to that program that submit bugs to us, and we pay them for that. And then we work with the vendor to responsibly disclose the patch that they hopefully will create. Not all the time do they create them, but we kind of put their feet to the metal and to the fire and make them produce a patch whether they like it or not, which is good. But they also have hacking contests, which they call Pwn2Own. That's PWN, the number 2, and then own, which has been around for many, many years. And they just had one in Berlin with the focus on kind of business applications, but a new area, which is artificial intelligence software. And so that's been an interesting one, and we'll talk a little bit further about that. But Greg, I mean, obviously we've been around for many, many years, and one of the tactics that the adversaries continue to use, and in fact, the Verizon data breach report just came out recently and said vulnerability, exploits of vulnerabilities was one of the top ways of getting initial access into organizations. So obviously the adversaries know that patch management has been a challenge for a long time and will probably continue to be, right?
Yeah, the whole business of patches and vulnerabilities is interesting. Of course, there's other things besides exploits of vulnerabilities, such as hacking processes or people or social engineering, things like that. Brute forcing your way in, but the whole economy of this is interesting. Especially as you mentioned with Pwn2Own, it's really part of this virtuous cycle now where the good guys are very actively paying for this for a good reason, not to be mischievous, but force, like you said, force the whole company's feet to the fire to make sure that they patch these things. There's even things like reverse engineering patches and the like, which is a whole fascinating subset. But yeah, I know this is important, especially as the bad guys are speeding up their use of exploits.
Well, and the whole premise of why Pwn2Own and Zero Day Initiative came about was because we want to buy them instead of these researchers selling them into the underground markets, and so for use in a malicious way, right? So, in this case, we paid out just over $1 million in bounties just for this one contest, which is pretty significant. The first place team actually brought home $320,000 among that group, and out of 28 zero days that were submitted and were successfully done at the event, 7 of those were in the AI category. So we're starting to see some, which is good, is because AI obviously is taking over the world by storm. But again, people got to understand AI is just software. Software is going to have bugs. So what we're trying to do is start to get a process where these bugs for AI software are submitted through us instead of being sold in the underground markets and the gray markets and to nation states where they'll be used, they'll be abused, in fact, right?
Yeah, John, vulnerability research is just a mirror of what people are buying. So, we could be criticized and say, oh, you're hyping up AI by doing, a new category for that. But AI is being hyped by the infrastructure, so we have to secure it. So it's going to be unfortunate. It was like cloud, the same thing happened, cloud this, cloud that. You have to say cloud 10 times every meeting, but that's what our customers, i.e. ops, are doing. So, we have to secure what they're using.
Yeah, and vulnerability management and patch management over the years has always been a challenge. MITRE, for example, right, they published all the CVEs every year. I think last year it was over 32,000 CVEs. Obviously, companies can't patch all of the CVEs in a timely basis because there's just too many anymore, because obviously software runs businesses. So every software application that they get is going to have some kind of security patch coming out almost monthly these days. Microsoft does the patch Tuesday every month, but think about all the other software, and now adding a new software stack, a AI software stack, you're just going to have more CVEs you're going to have to deal with. And so companies are going to have to get a handle on this. And the good news, though, and we don't want to be doom and gloom here, but the good news is, working with AI, you can actually start producing more information about a CVE and deliver that to a customer now, who can take better action on whether they need to patch or not, because the context and the information now that we can deliver to them about each and every CVE is way better than it ever has been.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about prioritization and how long things take. Most of the vulnerabilities that are discovered will never have an exploit put out for them, but an exploitable one with a proof of concept, that's a whole different ball of wax, right? And this, I think we're getting better about prioritization security. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately is, as the speed of security is getting so much better now, with us being so proactive and having, much better telemetry, I think we're getting almost ahead of ops now by a significant margin. That, as a security person, I want to spend more time now with ops, helping them reflect on these changes rather than just get the security house in order. I want to influence them and say, look, patch your patch speed or this part of the infrastructure much too slow. How can we change this? So they become the focus rather than purely the SOC and what we're detecting and reacting. We're getting just so quick. It's now the ops just can't keep up.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of like an exposure management platform, where you're now starting to be able to see what vulnerabilities you have in your attack surface. Are they patched? Are they not patched? But then if you do find a breach, and you can tie it back to that specific exploit of a vulnerability, you can realize, hey, you can even say, well, there was a patch for that for 35 days. We didn't patch it. Maybe we should have, right? And you start to understand your patch and your vulnerability exposure much more effectively nowadays than you ever had. And that's just because of the technology improvements and advancements that have come about, I would say, just in the last 18 months.
Yeah, I agree. And security has been really focused on, patch severity, which is fine. But even a a mid-level sort of severity patch, or vulnerability, if it's tied to your most critical data and your most vulnerable or important employees, that's the context that we haven't had until just very recently, that we can tie this together and get more meaning into that in context. The posture and the importance of the assets. So that's really changed things. So it's not just, patch all your 10 severity CVEs, but, patch the stuff that's protecting your most important stuff. So there's a few layers now of complexity, but it's context is everything.
Yeah, and the challenge that we're starting to see, obviously, is when a new CVE hits, right, or a new patch is published out there, the adversaries are taking advantage of it quicker than they ever have before, especially if it is one of those CVEs that's associated with a critical application or a critical data inside an organization. So that information is getting out to the adversaries too. So it's kind of a twofold thing where, yeah, it's great for the defenders, but it's also giving the adversaries a key item about which ones to target in moving forward. And then AI is going to bring a whole new dilemma to us, because we're starting to see AI being able to identify new bugs in code and go through code and find those bugs. Even in one of the previous Pwn2Own events, we had a group that actually used AI to build and find a exploit of one of the patches or one of the vulnerabilities in a chained vulnerability that they used. So they had one component of it used AI, the rest they did manually. But think about a couple of years from now, probably the entire attack chain of vulnerabilities will be done via AI.
Yeah, AI, it doesn't do much novel, but it just, there's a little bit of caffeine on all the good stuff that people do today. So
yeah.
Very
so
true.
So the Pwn2Own thing, it was interesting to follow. There was a couple of collisions, and collisions basically is when a researcher submits a bug and that bug is already known by the vendor. And in a number of these cases, what happened was the vendor knew about it, but they hadn't patched it yet. So it just brought up the fact that these vendors need to patch these things probably sooner than later. I know the 0-day initiative gives 120 days for a vendor to, from when we submit the information to them. And again, part of our reason that a lot of these researchers go to the 0-day initiative, they submit the bug to us and then they're done. They get paid and they're done. We manage the whole process of packaging it up, making sure all the information is there so that the vendor can take it and make it easily build out a patch for them. So the 120 days is interesting. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize, Greg, is that we have a IPS product out there called Tipping Point uses it. Our endpoint products use it. And what that is a virtual patch. And so what happens is when those bugs are submitted to the 0-day initiative, we start to understand what is that, and we start building virtual patches immediately. And last year, for example, we had almost a little over 3 months of protection from any exploit of that vulnerability prior to the public patch being disclosed. So definitely benefits our customers to work with us. But these vendors really do like the 0-day initiative because they do a great job of interfacing with those vendors, making it very easy for them to deal with the bugs that are submitted.
Yeah, no, it's a great point you make about IPS being a pre-patch shield. Unfortunately, much of the IPS in the world is embedded in firewalls, and lately the edge devices, and mostly firewalls, have been just a dumpster fire of vulnerabilities. Like the last year has just been the worst year on record for vulnerabilities. So, why bother going after stuff inside when you can just knock over the edge and you've got the run of the place? So shame on firewall vendors right now. Get your act in order and get your code in order. It's just, this is not okay. You're not routers. Okay, people don't expect you to be Swiss cheese. This is a firewall. You're a security product. Start freaking acting like it. So
yeah, that's been, I mean, Salt Typhoon, for example, they were the ones who targeted the telcos earlier or last year and earlier this year, and that's what they used, right? They were able to get into access, and unfortunately, these Chinese actors get in and they're able to stay resident for months and months and inside these organizations. So, but yeah, I know that's it's like every week there seems to be a new 0-day vulnerability that's being exploited in the wild from these vendors. So I would agree with you. They got to deal with that. Now, one of the things that Trend, you may not know, Trend Micro pledged the CISA Secure by Design pledge. We signed that last year at RSA because obviously as a security vendor, we have to make sure our code is safe as well. A lot of these actors, like Greg just said, are targeting security products because a lot of times they don't have good code. And so we've been working with CISA and the Secure by Design pledge to ensure we have, there's like 8 components to the pledge, and we're working on all of those, and a lot of them we've fixed and covered, but we're trying to do our part to make sure our code is as secure as possible. Now, moving forward, obviously, securing by design coding is imperative for everybody out there. And if your company produces code and you haven't signed that pledge, I'd recommend you go to the CISA website and sign that pledge and start working on ensuring your code is safe.
Yeah, it on its own doesn't change your code, but it can help you pressure groups to do better. And of course, accidents, mistakes always happen, but not a lot of mistakes. So yeah, it's a tool.
One of the things, one of the components is getting rid of whole classes of vulnerabilities that have been abused by the adversaries on a regular basis over the years. And so there's only a couple of these classes. And so I think one of those things is understand what those classes are, and then work with your vendors to make sure that they're patching those and have good code around those, because those are key, those are easy fodder for the adversaries to build a new exploit out when a new vulnerability is found. So
buffer overflows weren't just invented last month, for example. So,
not at all.
Hey, John, we were talking earlier about our recent travels, and I was in the UK doing an event there, and discussions amongst the security execs that were at the event Well, right now we're seeing this campaign against retail, and we're having discussion about how a lot of the campaigns now are vertical based. So it was kind of a call to work with your competitors more, to secure yourself collectively and to talk to each other about what's going on. So there was a noteworthy case in the UK of retail that then happened in North America, very analogous to what you mentioned about Salt Typhoon going after telcos. So it seems to be a common or a new trend now is verticalized campaigns.
And that's what's interesting, because obviously we've had ISACs for years that are industry focused, right? And so why they haven't built out a better, communication and sharing of and intelligence is kind of weird to me. But I kind of get it. Your competitor's your competitor. They're taking your customers from you, and you're taking customers from them, and you're fighting for that market share. But still, the challenge we have obviously is, like you said, the adversaries who are starting to go verticalize their attacks. That's going to be a challenge for them. And so, I was recently in London as well earlier this year, Greg, for the GASA, which is the Global Anti-Scam Summit, and a lot of those financial institutions, especially in London, they have actually, the banks and financials exactly have gotten together, and they're sharing a lot of that data about the scammers and which scams they're doing and how they're doing it. And it's actually made a pretty big impact in preventing the scams in London and the UK. So I definitely recommend that happens more often than not.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you for your last trip, most recent one? What was the chatter there?
Yeah, it was interesting because AI obviously has been in the news a lot, but actually we're starting to see people get a little AI fatigue.
Yeah,
Like, you guys yell doom and gloom and cry wolf all the time about AI being used in these attacks. And the reality is we're not seeing a lot of AI usage by the adversaries yet. Yet, I stress yet.
yeah.
But because they're lazy. They don't want to change. They don't need to change if the traditional threats work. So, we had a couple of slides talking about our incident response team at Trend, who's gone into a lot of breaches and identified that a lot of the causes of breaches are still just the old school stuff that we just aren't patching. We aren't, doing good misconfigurations are abound and all that stuff. So I think that, if we pivot too much about talking about AI and forget about doing the basics, you're just going to have problems, because you got to fix those basics before you can even deal with the new stuff that's coming up.
Yeah, we're stuck in this loop that we always do in security. It was like cloud, everything was going to be cloud, cloud based, and now it's AI. Actually, my latest gimmick on stage is to cover my eyes and ask how many people in the audience have an AI security policy in their organization, and then I say, let me guess, one or two. Right, I put my hand out, one or two always, no matter the size of the audience. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of the conversation. I think people were definitely thankful that we didn't just focus on AI, even though
Yeah.
we did. But so it's good to always go back and look at the reality versus the hype. We've had a couple of blogs about that, and our research shows that they aren't doing it. So in my opinion, until the defense mechanisms get better at detecting the current threats, these guys, they aren't going to change, right? They're going to
Not
change
radically. Yeah.
once the defenders get to the point where they can defend against the majority of the attacks that target them. I
Yeah.
think we're getting there. So the good news is I think AI on the defense side is doing way more than AI on the offense side at this point. It'll shift
Absolutely.
at some point, but not until the defense side gets better.
Yeah, my prediction for kind of lowest to highest of the top three is AI use by defenders is the lowest, AI as a part of the attack surface is second, and AI used by defenders is definitely the most
Yeah.
valuable right now.
Yeah, and I was talking to one of our AI specialists the other day, and he was talking about that AI to target humans. Yes, that'll be done. Good, better phishing attacks, etc. But AI targeting systems, that's going to be down the road. So for securing your systems, go back to your traditional patch management, misconfigurations, find your misconfigurations, look at your accounts that are on those systems and get access to those system database, make sure they're secure. Those are things that are going to go way farther than trying to deal with and worry about some AI attacking your systems.
Yeah, devices or parts of your environment where there's no MFA, systems where there's no EDR. That's the easy stuff. Swiss cheese firewalls. At the edge.
But again, it's the edge, and it's one of the first things they see when they come into an organization. It's easy, right? A lot of those are external facing, so they're going to be the first ones to get popped by these adversaries, unfortunately. So if you do have these edge devices, I would get on your vendors to produce better code, more secure code, and make sure that they're patching as fast as possible. So if you do get a security patch for your edge device, that's probably one of the wake-up calls that, you need to patch that and apply that patch immediately versus waiting.
Several decades ago, there used to be a design which was having two firewalls, one behind the other from different vendors. So vulnerabilities in one would be not present in the other. And that's gone away as the firewalls got better. And the idea was you're more likely to misconfigure two different vendors than you would from one. So in the absence of vulnerabilities, it was the misconfigurations. But now I think we could be back to the two firewall vendors again. So
yeah, that'll be interesting. Good for the firewall industry.
Well, or not for individual salespeople unless you're a reseller and you represent two different vendors.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll charge you 20% more to get two brands in the same, right? Yeah.
Two brains are better than one, right?
Yeah, two brands. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, this has been a good discussion. Any last minute thoughts for the audience, Greg?
I liked your point about putting AI in context. You can't ignore it, but it shouldn't be all you talk about all day either.
Yeah. So everybody, thanks for joining Greg and I on episode 43 of Trend Talks BizSec. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about a new topic. Give us a like and leave us a comment on any topics that you'd like us to pick up in the future. We'd love to hear from you, the audience, on what to cover. So we're happy to talk about pretty much anything around, business security and the security industry. So Greg, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will talk soon.
Hey, great talking to you again, John. Thanks.
Bye now.